So Mr. Smith and Mr. Stein were driving to a business meeting 290 miles from their office. Mr. Smith drove the first X miles, then Mr. Stein drove the rest of the way. Write an algebraic expression for how many miles Mr. Stein drove. How are we going to do that? It might be helpful to do a diagram. Certainly not required, but I'm gonna do it because I think it might help you. So let's think about it. So here's where they're starting here, and here's where their meeting is. They're driving to. Okay, so the first part of the journey is Mr. Smith. So Mr. Smith. Oh, here it is. Mr. Smith drove the first X miles. So Mr. Smith drove the first X miles. So I don't know what that is, X. I'll just say to here. So let's say this is Mr. Smith and X miles. That's what Mr. Smith drove. Okay. And then Mr. Stein drove the rest of the way. So whoops. So Stein drove the rest of the way. And the question is, oh, and the whole meeting, the whole distance, put that on there also. The whole meeting is there, to there, 290, right? Okay, so the whole thing is 290. 290, so 290 total miles, right? Business meeting 290 miles from their office. And Mr. Smith drove the first X. So what's the expression for how far Mr. Stein drove? What are we going to do? So there's a picture of the thing. How far did Mr. Stein drive? Mr. Smith did the first X. It's 290 all the way. How far did Mr. Stein drive? One thing I've noticed is helpful. So this might really help you. I've noticed over the years, it's way easier for me and for everybody to, when there's an X, X's are weird. It's easier to put in a number. So for X, if you're having any trouble on like a problem that has an X or any other letter in it, for X, put in an easy number like 10 or 100. So in this case, I'll do 100. So let's just suppose it's 100. I've noticed that I think much better with numbers than I do with letters. And I think you'll probably find the same thing to be true for you. That if somebody will just give you a number, you know exactly what to do. Letters are weird, but X, Mr. Smith drove X. That just sounds strange. But Mr. Smith drove 100 miles. That we can deal with. We know what that means. Mr. Smith drove 100 miles. The whole trip is 290. So how would I find the expression for how far Mr. Stein drove? Huh? What would I do for Mr. Stein? If Mr. Smith drove 100, the whole trip is 290, how far would Stein drive? What would I do there? Wouldn't you take the whole 290 and subtract the 100? Right? Because the whole distance is 290, subtract the part Smith drove, and you get the remainder that Stein drove. So I think you all know that right away. You're like, yeah, of course that's right. Well, then I pretended the X was 100. So then just put the X back where the 100 was, and there's your formula, 290 minus X. So there we go. So that's just an easier way. We just think better with numbers than we do with letters. So if you're confused with a letter situation, just put in a nice, if you have an X, put in a nice easy number like 10 or 100. I put in 100. And then just think, what would I do with 100? Oh, I'd take 290 minus 100. So then just do 290 minus x. There it is. That's the algebraic expression for how far Mr. Stein drove to finish that trip.